The first time I met you, Kai, I used the word she. And you very politely came up to me afterwards and you said, please don't refer to me as a she because I'm non-binary, gender fluid. Well, I think you said I'm transgender actually the first time. And you said, I like to be called a they or a them. And I remember my response at the time because it's the very, very first time I had heard this as a concept at all. And I'm the age I am, middle-aged with 2 kids who are teenagers. And I thought, oh my goodness, right. So this is new. So you said this to me and I thought, I remember responding, I might make a mistake. I will try my best to remember. And forevermore, whenever we met and I said the she word, I'd always go, sorry, Kai. And you'd go, that's okay. Now, explain these pronouns, the they and the them, for those who don't understand this, because it was my ignorance that fueled this podcast in the first place.
So basically, using they, them pronouns is something that not all non-binary people do, but it is something that a lot do because they feel uncomfortable being gendered. It's the same as if you had a dead name, like a previous name before you transitioned. Being called that would make you associate with those feelings of not being who you know you are. And I think for a lot of people it was really hard to accept. My mum still struggles because she is always like, they is a plural. And I'm like, did you ever go to English class? Because it isn't. It is a single and a plural.
But in popular use, they is a plural. And our general understanding is it is a plural. So it's quite confusing. But equally, you're telling us that actually it's more confusing for you to be called one gender or another. So you'd rather be pluralized, if you want to put it like that. Is that true, or am I totally off the mark here?
For instance, like if you saw someone in the street and you weren't sure of their gender, people would usually say they're so attractive, or they do this, and they're talking about one person, but because they're unsure of which pronoun to use, they would use they.
Okay.
So the reason that non-binary people often use they is because it's a good alternative. There aren't, and it is an alternative that people do use even for people that use he and she pronouns. Not in older generations as much, because I guess it just isn't as well known. But I think that it's not exactly difficult to think about. Like, once you start doing it, practice makes perfect, you know. Same when people change their name. And I also think that even if you disagree with the idea that you need to use a different pronoun, you should never impose your idea on someone. Like, if you want to associate with someone who uses they, them pronouns, just use their pronouns. Even if you don't understand it.
Yeah. And do you get cross with people who refer to you as a she?
I get cross if people refuse to use they.
Yes.
I have said many times before to people, I use they, them pronouns, but if anyone is really struggling, I would rather you refer to me as he than she, because he is an acknowledgement that I'm trans, even though I don't associate myself as a boy.
You do associate.
I don't.
You don't.
I don't associate.
So
myself
what do you understand by the term transgender, non-binary?
So non-binary is the umbrella term for anything outside of male and female, and boy and girl. More specifically, I associate with the term gender fluid, which means that my gender identity fluidly changes between male, female, masculine, feminine, a mixture of those two, and an absence of those feelings on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So you don't, you don't use the term transgender for you then?
I mean, I would, like, it would apply technically, but usually I would say non-binary because it's more specific. But I usually wouldn't say gender fluid because it's too specific.
Right.
And I don't, it doesn't matter if people know that, you know? Like, usually I wouldn't even tell, but I'd just say I use they, them.
Yeah. Because traditionally, I would have thought long ago that transgender meant you crossed into the other gender. But I'm obviously wrong. Am I?
Well, that's the big thing, is transgender just means different from what you were born. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going the whole way.
Okay.
There's a huge conception, even with people who understand transgender, that if you're transgender, it's black and white. You are a boy in a girl's body and you want to transition and you want to do all the surgeries, but that's not what people want to do. Surgery isn't for everyone, and some people are perfectly comfortable in their bodies but have an identity that they'd want people to acknowledge. For me, I'm perfectly comfortable in the body that I am in. I don't need my body to change for me to acknowledge that I'm not a woman. And I think it's thanks to the way I was brought up and thanks to the way that the world's been changing that I can feel comfortable. Because even with my body, I know that so many people I talk to, when I say that I'm non-binary, they say, okay.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned earlier about, seeing people as male or female. Like I've through the years seen lots of configurations of male and female. I would, it's inevitable that people in our heads will label people. Like if I saw you in the street, I might, in my previous labeling, say, well, she's probably a gay woman who's more butch than femme. Now, obviously, in this context, is that really offensive for me to say that now? Or is that, do you understand where I'm coming from?
I understand where you're coming from, but I think there's the problem with labeling in any kind is that it's not helpful, and also it's usually wrong.
It just seems more complicated and convoluted, maybe is a better term, than it was before.
I can see where that's coming from, but it's...
At the end of the day, what I always say to people is like, yeah, it is more complicated, but at the end of the day, being trans and having feelings of dysphoria are the types of things that cause people to have severe mental illness, can cause people to take their own lives. Like, there shouldn't be something that people are complaining about, saying, oh, it's just so complicated now. Like, people died because of these feelings. People
are still dying because of these feelings
because they can't express it. To be trapped and feel unable to be yourself is a completely suffocating feeling.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about this, that sometimes it's never good to assume gender at all, but sometimes you'll meet someone and you'll be like, you'll definitely think they are a certain pronoun, but it really takes 2 seconds to say, hey, can I get a pronoun check? Especially if you're unsure, or if you're too embarrassed to ask, just avoid using pronouns. You can always use their name, just a lot in a sentence.
Well, the fact is, the fact I would even have to stall myself and ask that question, it takes me back from the person.
Well, but for instance, I met Connor for the first time today, and one of the first things I said to him was, hey, could I get a pronoun check?
You see, that's a term I've never even heard before. Can I get a pronoun check?
Could I what pronouns do you use?
Yeah.
It's one of the first things I said to you.
Yeah. It's common courtesy to me. It's one of the first things I would say to someone unless I'd heard someone else say that pronoun.
But then you're assuming a certain knowledge from most people around you. Certain people above a certain age, to use the certain word again, basically, it wouldn't have even come into our language. So for us, who are older, it's confusing for us because we're going, oh, right, this is a whole new world. As much as the internet has been a whole new world, AI is a whole new world. There's so many things being thrown at you. But that, in terms of gender, it seems almost like and I know I'm going to offend you by saying this, is this just a bandwagon that people are getting on because the internet is there and people are going, oh, hey, that's really interesting. Why don't I try this? Or
I think there's a big problem with the idea of saying it's new, saying this new thing, because it isn't new. You know about it now, which is why it's new. It's like when you come out and everyone's like, shock. And you're like, it's not really that shocking. I've known for years. Like, they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. It's something that goes back years. People have been gender non-conforming. People like David Bowie and people in those sort of eras were playing with gender and gender non-conforming long before now. And going back into tribal eras, Native American Two-Spirit, lots of African tribes who didn't conform to male and female. The concepts of femininity and masculinity as we know them today are a colonial concept. They were enforced on people by colonialization, by the Catholic Church, by rigid ideas, by patriarchy, by the idea that you had to have a subjugated sex, even though we know that sex isn't even as rigid as that. Intersex people do exist.
I know they do, for sure. I've never met an intersex person, but
you may well have.
Aware.
You may well
That's
have met
very
someone who
true.
is intersex.
That's a very good point. Thank you. I'm very, very likely at this stage of my life might have. Yeah. So I'm really interested to know where your beginnings for all of this. You've grown up in a small town in America.
I have. Well,
describe where you came from.
So I came from a town of, I think my mother said we had about 15,000 people, which doesn't sound that small, but it's not all packed together like it is over here. Very, very spread out, and also very close-knit community. You know, I was going to church from the time I was, before I was born. I was baptized in the same church that my parents and grandparents got married in. Very set in this is tradition, and I love tradition. And my family, I don't want to say they're conservative because they've always told me to be who I want to be, But we were Christian and we lived in America, and I remember very distinctly, actually, my mother doesn't remember this, but I do. One day when I must have been 5 or 6, I looked up at her and I said, Mom, can girls marry girls? And she said to me, in some states. But normally they don't want to. And I just left it at that.
She said normally.
And I just kind of left it at that because I was a child. Didn't really think about it. When I moved over here, things were suddenly very, very different. The place I came from, everyone knew everyone. We were a lot of upper middle class white Christians. If you knew someone who was homosexual, it would be they were that way, And everyone knew who they were and they were accepting of it, but it would be, so-and-so, our gay friends. And everyone was very happy with people being gay as long as it wasn't in their face. And it's still like that in the States a lot. A lot of people will say, I don't mind. People can do whatever they like, but I don't understand
privacy of their own.
But I don't understand why I have to be told about it. It was a lot more freeing when I came over here in that respect. To be fair, I was only 8. I didn't really have any sexual awakening at that age. I think I probably figured out that I wasn't straight about the time I was 12. And not because of my parents, because my parents are totally accepting. My mother has trouble with pronouns and things like that, especially with Kai. She loves Kai, but she'll go on the phone. She, he, they, them, they. And I'll be like, okay, Mom, at least she's trying. And I really, really appreciate that. It was difficult because kids in school paint other kids in a very certain light. And then my own conservative upbringing, well, again, not conservative, but straight-laced, I'll say, upbringing, sort of reinforced it, I guess. So people were more openly not upper-middle-class white Christians over here. But those people were singled out, not necessarily in a bad way, but they were singled out. And I'd spent the better part of my life trying to blend into the shadows because being the American was obvious enough.
I just find it so amazing that that you were so ready to jump on board when I came out to you when we first met, when you'd never met a transgender person before.
There'd been people
a non-binary person.
Well, I'd had a friend actually in high school who we'd been really, really close. And then when they came out as non-binary, we were still kind of close.
Okay.
And now they've actually come out as fully, they've fully transitioned. And we're still not that close, but I do appreciate what they taught me in that, because it did give me an awareness of, pronouns and respecting that not everyone it's not all black and white. But until I met Kai, I didn't have any sense of self, did I? At all. I was so confused, and Kai just kind of dealt with that. And
yeah, when we first met, you were very much sort of like, I am a straight woman. And I was like, cool.
You didn't pressure me into anything
No.
either. Like, a lot of people seem to think that you make friends with someone who isn't straight or isn't cis, and you get sort of roped into the community.
It's like some of our friends say, it's like
It's catching.
People say like, oh, it's catching, when really it's more that
You feel freer.
you feel freer. Like in our group of friends, most of us are queer in some way, and it's because some of our friends came into our friendship group with the knowledge that they were straight, and after meeting us felt able to explore that part of themselves. We have one friend who was very much said that they were heterosexual when we first met, and is now
with a girl.
Just because she'd never thought about it before.
And it's actually spreading to other parts of my life, the American parts of my life. My own mother has told me, when I came out to her as bisexual, she did tell me, maybe we won't clue your grandmother in unless there's a wedding she needs to attend.
Mm-hmm.
And
As in your own. With
yeah.
a woman.
And I decided, that's fair enough. My grandmother's from a very different time than my own. I don't want to shock her, anything like that. But actually, I've become a lot closer with one of my cousins, because about the same time we both came out, and it was very unifying. And she lives in the States, and she's actually also polyamorous, and she's only 16 at the moment. But it's very nice that we both have someone we can talk to and call whenever it feels a little pressurized, especially by things like, my mother has said to me, hey, I think you're going to realize you do want to be with a man and settle down and have a family.
But being with a woman doesn't preclude you from having a family, if that's
Exactly.
what you want.
That's what he said.
Yeah. But you use the term bisexual, so is that what you currently think because things can change. You may...
I'm fairly set in in what I believe to be my own sexual identity.
I think sexuality is way less confusing than gender.
Oh, it's
like
tons less
gender, I'm
confusing.
always like, I don't know, maybe this term fits me better. Like, I don't know, it's such a weird feeling, but like, I was pretty sure of my sexuality for most of my life.
So would you identify as lesbian then?
Absolutely not.
No. Well, what would you call your sexuality then? I don't know.
For a start, I'm non-binary, so I can't be a lesbian because I'm not a woman.
Okay.
And I'm pansexual, which means attracted to people regardless of gender.
Whereas I'm attracted to... A lot of people think, we've had this talk before, a lot of people think bisexual means I'm attracted to men, I'm attracted to women. Singular woman.
Oh, singular woman.
But it doesn't. It means you're attracted to people of the same gender and other genders, and you do see their gender. It doesn't necessarily matter, but you do still see it.
It's about acknowledging bisexuality is about acknowledging this is a traditional female form.
Yes.
I'm attracted to it. This is a traditional male form. I'm also attracted to it. Whereas pansexual is like, don't really care what you've got underneath your clothes. Just be nice to me and I'll probably like you.
I mean, if I really had a problem with gender, I think I'd get in trouble with my boyfriend.
I think you might.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that is really interesting. I'm just looking down to see what else I was going. Oh, yeah. Kai, apparently, there's something about bathrooms I have to ask you.
Well, being non-binary, there's usually only 2 bathrooms to go in, and some days going into a female bathroom will feel very horrible because I don't want to be labelled as a woman. But also being in a male bathroom can be very uncomfortable. Once I needed to go into the male bathroom, so my dad took me. And so we went into the bathroom together, and we were in London, and this dude came in and started like hurling abuse at us about how I wasn't allowed to be in the bathroom. And my dad luckily like looked after me and got me out of there. But like, I don't know, people are so hyped up about bathrooms these days. Like, we're really lucky because on our campus we have bathrooms that are specifically for
The inclusive ones.
We have inclusive bathrooms that have the transgender symbol on that you can go in. We also have male and female bathrooms that are connected. So if you want to go into a male door and then go into the female bathroom, you can. And I think that so many people have a problem with it, but I just don't understand why it makes a difference who pees next to you.
I suppose the only reason there has been segregated loos is because men use urinals. So girls might not, if they identify as being a girl, they might not want to see that, you know.
But for instance,
then for young males, they have to deal with that. You know, young male children.
You shouldn't ever like confront someone in a bathroom because you don't know their truth. For instance, I know someone who's intersex who appears female outwardly but has male genitalia. And for them, sometimes they want to use a male bathroom because it's easier. Yeah. And so when people are like, get out of my bathroom, they're like, yo, I need to use it. Like, if I was in a female bathroom and I saw someone I thought looked male, I wouldn't be like, how dare you be here? I'd be like, have fun peeing.
But that's because you are who you are and you're very open-minded about these things. But then for most people who've grown up in the traditional system where there's a male toilet and a female toilet, because things are now changing, and luckily they are changing to embrace whatever people want, you know, it is challenging their preconceptions. And over time, as new buildings are built, this is going to be the norm.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it's changed in just the last few years of me going places and them having like a bathroom that specifically says like, this is the mixed gendered bathroom, and I'm like, thank you. it's not so much for me because I'm very confident in myself now, but when I was like 14, going into a female bathroom felt like shit. It felt soul destroying.
Yeah, because you just didn't identify with that world.
Oh, it was just wrong.
You. And we'll have even been in town, won't we, Kai? And you'll say, I need to go to the bathroom, and I say, oh, well, we'll go in here, and you'll be like, I can't go in there. If you're having a really bad day, I can't go in there. And you'll be like...
It gave me such a complex about public bathrooms.
We need to go home. We need to go home now. Personally, where I'm from, most of my family don't know that I identify gender-wise as anything other than a girl, a woman. I tried to tell my mother about it once, and she said, back in my day, we just called you tomboys. And I wanted to explain the difference to her, but it's so hard to explain the difference to someone who doesn't know what it feels like to not be completely at home with your assigned gender. And I think as long as the people close to you are trying and doing their best and respecting who you are, that's really all you can ask. You're not going to be able to change the world, and especially the way things are in the States. We've talked about it. We'd like to go to the States in the summer, And I'm a little bit scared for you just because of how the politics are at the moment, because it can be dangerous. And seeing something bad happen to someone I love because of the way my country is would absolutely tear me apart.
And do you think the UK is more embracing of gender issues than it is in the States?
There are definitely places in America that are very, very liberal, very, very accepting. But the thing about England is that because it's so much smaller, you don't have to travel as much to get to a more accepting place. And also...
and it spreads.
Yeah, it spreads really quickly. And also, like, places where it isn't as accepting, like smaller towns and villages, just don't go there.
Even where I'm from, though, which is a fairly small place, someone who came out as non-binary actually in high school, a very, very brave human, and I didn't realize just how brave until very, very recently, is now, from what I understand, a fairly big name. They've been featured in London Fashion Week. They've got a very, very successful blog. They're living their best life. But in school, they were Marmite. People either loved them or they hated them. And you never knew which side to be on. And everyone was making these assumptions on this person based on how they dressed and how they looked, not on who they were as a person. And I just kind of stayed out of it. But it wasn't until I was battling with myself as a person that I realized how incredibly brave that was to just be yourself at that age.
I can't even imagine how hard it must have been. I consider myself endlessly lucky to have grown up in a place and with a family who, despite not being 100% accepting, they were never going to be the people that were going to hate anything about me. They might have been like, we don't understand, but they would never have, like, disowned me or anything. That it's just not who they are, and it's not what my city is. My city is just the place just full of accepting anything that you want to be or feel you are. There's a place that you can do it.
Which is Norwich.
Yeah.
The final thing I wanted to ask you is about platonic relationships that might have been affected by you coming out.
This was the biggest issue for me. I have 2 female best friends, and we are close as anything. And I came out to my parents first. That was, after you. And I was so concerned. I don't know why, because these are some of the best people I'd know in my entire life. But something in my brain was so concerned about them knowing. I was worried they would think that I'd been trying something on with them all these years, I guess. But they didn't think that, of course. Because all you can see when you realize it yourself is the fact that even though it meant nothing to you, you've changed with them before, you've had sleepovers, you've shared all your secrets with them, and you wonder where their mind is going to go. On the other hand, other platonic relationships have grown a lot stronger, like me and Kai.
Yeah. Like, we call each other QPB, queer platonic bro.
Yeah.
Like,
So
there's something about being queer and understanding someone's, like, queerness that just brings you together. It's like having a sibling, but, like, one that I'm not stuck with and love more
like
than anything.
I very comfortably call Kai my life partner.
All the time she'll be like, oh, when we raise our kids, and she means my kids with my partner, that she'll know.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah.
I fully expect us to get a little house in Norwich with a dog and, you know, your partner and maybe my partner. Early days yet. But so in that case, our relationship is a whole lot stronger. 'Cause, yeah, but meh.
I think it's hard sometimes for people to understand, like, especially with the whole not being straight thing. When you have a friend, it's like when straight people will have a male friend and everyone will be like, oh, are you dating? And they're like, no, we're just friends. It's the same as like, because we're both attracted to the same gender and stuff, like my family and other friends will always be like, just why don't you just date?
People are always asking why we aren't in a relationship.
And we're like, we don't think about each other that way. And I think it's the same for women and men. Men and women can be friends. There's so much stress put on like attraction and this idea that men and women are different, which is just not true.
I know, and it's ludicrous to imagine that if you're a straight person that you're attracted to every person of the opposite sex, of course. So
and it's the same with gay people.
Yeah.
And I love these girls dearly, but I would never sleep with them.
No, thank you.
So is there anything you would like to add that we haven't covered? Or any advice you'd like to give?
Just that don't be in denial about it.
Always be unapologetically yourself.
Even if it's not to other people. I'm not saying jump out of the closet head first. You know, you'll probably whack your head and get a concussion. It's more important to identify who you are as a person. If you're not ready to come out yet, that's fine. If you are, do it with a flash, a bang, or, you know, even to your mother over breakfast when she's asking if she thinks your brother's gay and you say, no, mom, wrong child.
I think a big thing as well is to understand that you don't need validation. It took me a long time to understand that I didn't need it to know who I was. And that there's always going to be people that do understand, like, the world's changing all the time. There's places in the world that you're going to find where you will find a home where people will always accept you. It's always going to be hard. I don't think knowing who you are is ever going to get easier, no matter how perception and society changes. Even now, when I think about how hard it was for me growing up, I just think about how much harder it could have been. I hope that the schooling system will cotton on at some point and give us a sex education that includes identity, because knowing who you are is so important. Feeling like you're uncomfortable in your own skin is just awful. You're the number one authority on you. And if you know who you are, then it doesn't matter what other people think.
Fantastic. I don't think we can add anything else to that.